This was when they, just entered toddlerhood, essentially. I started to see changes in the way that they were eating. Solids was, I don't want to say a breeze, but it was fine. We didn't really have any issues. Things went as expected. All of a sudden one day I woke up and it felt like they both at the same time, because they do learn from each other, decided I don't want to eat anything. I only want chicken nuggets. I only want pizza. And they weren't even foods that I was offering a ton, but once they got tastes of these things, it's like they took over, right?
What are the benefits of baby-led feeding?
And so baby-led weaning, the definition, is basically offering finger foods from day one to your baby and allowing them to self-feed on those finger foods. So this is, for the most part, parents were controlling the pace of the meal, or they were controlling the types of foods that went into your baby's mouth. And then we don't want to also see any excessive gagging. So I did mention that. We will see gagging. We want to see gagging. Gagging means actually that they are safe, that their effective gagging mechanism is firing away and keeping them safe and keeping food at the front of their mouth or out of their mouth. Beautiful. Then the other part to it is, because kids are so playful and so, again, developmentally wired to learn through play, I love food play at the table. I love it. I would, again, forget eating it. That's not even a goal, or pretend it's not a goal for you. Act like poker face. I don't even care if you eat it or not.
Hi, and welcome to Kidsy Connects. Today, I am so excited to be chatting to our next guest, Edwena Kennedy. Edwena is a registered pediatric dietitian. She's a mom of two, and she's the founder of My Little Eater, an internationally recognized platform that empowers parents globally to confidently raise healthy little eaters from babyhood through toddlerhood. Edwena has over 14 years of experience in pediatric nutrition, and she's educated and supported almost 500,000 parents worldwide through her industry-leading courses. Edwena, welcome to the show. I am so excited to get into this with you today.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, you're a mom of two, I'm a mom of two, and I think we can all, as parents, appreciate just how complicated and tricky and sometimes messy feeding kids is as a subject. I'd love to get started from the beginning and ask you what it is, about this that inspired you to take this up as a career.
So this all started about 14 years ago for me. My kids are now much older. So my son, my oldest, is he's 16, almost 17, which is just crazy to say out loud. My youngest is 15. So this was when they, just entered toddlerhood, essentially. I started to see changes in the way that they were eating. Solids was, I don't want to say a breeze, but it was fine. We didn't really have any issues. Things went as expected. All of a sudden one day I woke up and it felt like they both at the same time, because they do learn from each other, decided I don't want to eat anything. I only want chicken nuggets. I only want pizza. And they weren't even foods that I was offering a ton, but once they got tastes of these things, it's like they took over, right? So I spent a couple months just racking my brain. I was stressed out. I would talk to my husband. I would argue with my husband about what to do, what's the best strategy. And, I didn't know where to turn. And at this time, I was in the nutrition program. I wasn't fully graduated as a dietitian, but I had some great knowledge as to, how to feed, according to the nutrition standards anyway, how to feed kids. But this was something I had never encountered. So I went where most people went. I went online. I went to my doctor. I asked all the questions, and I kept getting, from my doctor, basically, don't worry, it's a phase. They'll overcome this, just keep doing what you're doing. I was like, well, that's not helpful. And then when I would go online, it would either be really vague things like, keep exposing them to new foods, or it would be super theoretical mumbo jumbo, and it was all these different research articles, but there was no plan for how to implement it, in what order, and what do I do when they fight back, or, they throw their food, or when they skip a meal. Like, how do you deal with all that? So that was basically what got me into this. I started researching like crazy. I graduated as a dietitian, and that's when I started specializing with all the courses I was taking to really deep dive into the pediatric world. And as I was going through all this, I started implementing it with my kids, but then also with my clients. So that was how we started to develop a good framework, a really good step-by-step program. And that's sort of my forte, is really taking parents step by step by step, this is what you do first, then this, and just kind of holding their hand, and basically how our online programs were born. So we have our Feeding Toddlers program, of course, which was basically how to prevent and manage picky eating and toddlerhood. But we also have our baby-led feeding program, which is how to start solids with purees or baby-led weaning to prevent picky eating, because it's all really connected and the journey is sort of one and the same. But again, we don't really get taught that. We kind of maybe get a little help here or maybe get a little help here. But when you know the full picture, the journey is so much easier and so much more enjoyable.
So let's start right at the beginning of that journey. You briefly mentioned baby-led weaning. So I want to dive into that because I know that's oftentimes the starting point for so many parents in their feeding journey. What is baby-led weaning? And I know in your work, you also talk about baby-led feeding. So can you tell us what the difference between the two is?
Yes, definitely. So oftentimes when I see baby-led feeding written out online, it's used to mean baby-led weaning. And so baby-led weaning, the definition is basically offering finger foods from day one to your baby and allowing them to self-feed on those finger foods. So this is kind of new, I would say 15 years old process of feeding babies that was made known by Jill Rapley. And basically it's grown into a huge movement. There is lots of research around the benefits of baby-led weaning and how it contrasts to traditional feeding, which was puree feeding. And that was much more parent-led. Of course, it was purees on a spoon. For the most part, parents were controlling the pace of the meal, or they were controlling the types of foods that went into your baby's mouth. Whereas baby-led weaning was meant to offer a lot more freedom and again, put the power and control in baby's hands. And so it's absolutely great. However, very quickly into me starting this whole journey and working with parents, and even through my experience with feeding my kids, I realized that it is not easy to go from an all milk diet to all of a sudden offering your baby a chicken drumstick, right? It is a huge jump, and that can be really anxiety provoking for a lot of parents. And not only that, it can also mean, like, for some babies, they're not ready to actually jump into all of the textures and all of the things. And so we created a really sort of individualized approach at My Little Eater, and so that's what we call baby-led feeding. Essentially, you can start with purees or you can start with finger foods. It does not matter. There's no judgment around it. I mean, I've heard all of the things online about the wars between which one's better. Both of them are absolutely excellent, and we teach you with baby-led feeding how to make it baby-led either way. So your baby is going to learn those self-feeding skills. And then we teach you how to progress through textures wherever you start. We're going to help you progress through textures to get to more and more and more advanced ones through our proprietary framework. It's called the Texture Timeline Framework. And so that's sort of the baby-led feeding process. It's just really offering more flexibility. It's really meeting you where you are and your baby where they are, but still taking all the research into account so that we don't get picky eating. We're not keeping your baby stuck on purees. We're not missing those important self-feeding skills, and just basically getting the benefits of both worlds.
What are the benefits of baby-led feeding? Because I know there's so much of debate between this way's better and that way's better, and you briefly hinted that it is beneficial. So if you could just sum up perhaps top 3 reasons why parents should be leaning into baby-led feeding.
Sure. So baby-led feeding, like I alluded to, when baby is in control, that allows for a much happier, kind of easier, more exploratory process at the table. So we want exploration to happen because if baby is, if you think about a baby who is, again, spoon-fed, let's say, that food goes directly into their mouth and then swallowed, or maybe chewed and swallowed. They miss out on the opportunity to actually experience that food with all 5 senses. So they're not touching it. It's not on their hands. It's not on their skin. It's not on their face. They're not really smelling it. They're not looking at it and inspecting it and really learning about, like, what texture is this, or what happens when I smush it, or these different properties of food that actually teach babies how to like food and teach babies all the different types of food and broadens their kind of network, like their brain pathways and networks during a very sensitive period of time between 6 and 9 months, which we really want to develop so that they learn to like all these new foods. So with baby-led feeding, so again, even if you're doing purees, if you offer your baby purees on a spoon and let your baby hold it, they're going to be able to throw it. I know that's hard to hear for a lot of parents, but that's actually a good thing. They could put it on the tray again, they can look at it, they can smell it, they can maybe miss, and that's a good thing. It doesn't have to go in their mouth, but let's get it on their cheek and let them feel that sensation. Helps prevent sensory issues, and again, and prevents picky eating. And that messy part also is it brings a fun element to feeding. So oftentimes what I find is when we're not doing things in a baby-led way, parents become overly stressed about how much is going in, what type of food did they actually eat, and that becomes now like a calculation at every meal, and then weighing them and, trying to push food in, or maybe withholding certain food items because they didn't eat other ones first, so we get really focused on those nitty-gritty factors, when really the key to preventing picky eating and to really raising a baby who is loving all foods and loves mealtime is to have a joyful mealtime, is to be really stress-free, is to be able to explore and get messy and playful. So we just kind of are meeting babies developmentally where they are to be able to, basically get all those benefits. And then I would say the third thing, especially, again, even if you're doing, so when we talk about baby-led feeding, so whether you're doing purees or finger foods, a lot of times parents do get stuck on simple textures. So let me give you an example. It's pretty easy to think with purees. I mean, maybe they're stuck on like a thin or smooth kind of puree, or maybe it's got some slight lumps, but it's nothing really crazy where baby's chewing. Finger foods though, again, through so much experience, been over 14 years experience now working with parents, I constantly see we're stuck on the sweet potato and the banana and a rice rusk, maybe an arrowroot cookie, maybe we give an avocado, but like that could be a long time where they're on that type of food, where in reality, we actually want to broaden the types of textures that they're getting as well. So not just flavors, which most people know, but textures. So we want to progress them to get to more advanced textures. What about stringy textures, rubbery textures, crumbly textures, crunchy, like even like roasted cauliflower, broccoli, like those things matter, and the shapes and the feel in their mouth matter. So again, with baby-led feeding and with using our texture timeline framework, we're actually showing you all the different things that they should be exposing to your baby to, but easing you into it so that you can give your baby that full gamut, that full range that is required to prevent picky eating. But again, it's done in a way that's not overwhelming or too stressful.
Texture is such a big thing. I know, even not only for kids, but also for adults. Like now as a grown woman, there are certain foods that perhaps I have more or less affinity to because of how it feels rather than how it perhaps even smells or tastes or looks like. And I know texture is one of the sort of the humps that I had to overcome as a parent. I now have 2 toddlers, but in those very early months of transitioning to food, texture was a big thing. Mm-hmm. How do parents overcome this texture trouble? I know you've created a texture timeline framework. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about some of the things that you really encourage parents to do to encourage their kids to eat like the usual and perhaps then the unusual textures.
Definitely. Okay. So let's kind of walk through. I mean, for me, again, it's empowering the parent with confidence, because if you are confident, you're going to know and feel great implementing this stuff to your baby. So I always say start where you feel comfortable. Let's not go to what babies are eating online and say, I need to all of a sudden offer that. They need to be eating lamb and they need to be eating all these things. No, let's just start where you're at. So we encourage you to find what phase you're at on the texture timeline. So we have phase 0, which is going to be like the super thin, runny purees, and then hard, whole foods that your baby can't actually bite into, but that are finger foods. So picture like a mango pit, picture a chicken drumstick where you take off all the meat and all the cartilage, and an adult can't even bite through that bone. Those would be finger foods that are so low risk, no real risk for choking at all. And of course, it's going to give them that introduction to the idea of finger foods or purees. If you're there, great. Phase 1, that's where you're going to maybe, I think most parents tend to start here. It's going to be thicker, kind of creamier purees or thicker, creamier finger foods. So with purees examples, I always say like hummus is a great kind of example, because it doesn't run off of a spoon. You kind of have to like plop it a little bit and give it a little shake. And so it's got that thicker texture. That's going to allow your baby to start manipulating their tongue like back and forth this way, horizontally, up and down, and just sort of working it with their tongue. But they're not really doing any heavy chewing here, right? Finger food examples for that would be the roasted sweet potato. So it's super soft, so squishable. Again, you put it in your baby's mouth and that's gonna mash so easily. So there's a slight mashing, but it's really more tongue movements. There's no grinding, there's no munching to break it down too much, right? So that's an example, phase 1, you could start there. Phase 2 was gonna be more, less cohesive foods, I would say, and more lumps. We got like mashed beans maybe, or you can think of a bean burger if you want the finger food version of it, or like flaked fish stick, maybe your fish burger. So again, soft. We're not talking about a roasted, again, roasted broccoli and cauliflower is what's coming to mind, let's say, or stringy lamb or stringy chicken, or, a strip of chicken breast. Like, we're not there yet, but it's still going to give your baby so much stimulation in their mouth, and that's going to activate more oral motor skills. Then you can move on to phase 3. So I say start with where you are ready. Watch your baby and their skills. And we teach you in the framework what to look for. So when you're watching your baby, are they swallowing safely? Is there any coughing? Is there any gagging that is excessive? We can always talk about gagging, but gagging is very normal, and it's something that I encourage parents get used to it. But when you can get used to it on easier textures, and you know your baby recovered well and they're safe, and these are low risk foods, you're building your confidence, you're building their skills, and then we can go through the checklist. Did they do this, this, this? Yes, let's move them on. And so that is how I encourage both parents to be able to make that move and build their confidence, but also babies to develop those texture skills so that, they're not, again, used to one texture and then all of a sudden getting something new. Of course, they're going to refuse it, right? So we're just kind of building their competence as well through that process.
What are the signs to look for to know that your baby is ready for the next phase and next phase and next phase? Like, when do you know when to level up or when to kind of keep them on the same textures or foods that they're at? Because I think that can oftentimes be really confusing for parents. Like, I feel like with so many other parts of development, the milestones are perhaps a little bit more clear. Like, you know when your baby's going to start crawling or when they're pulling up to stand or when they might be ready for walking. But I feel like the food world, especially when it pertains to kids, is a little bit more murky and blurry, and we're all kind of just navigating through really just gut feel. Is there some science or some specific things we can look out for?
Yes. Okay. I'm so glad you asked this. So really, yes, when you go out into the grocery store and you look at like the labels on various baby food products, they're very arbitrary. They're not standardized. And that's because, again, babies will have experienced different things at 6 months. Other babies at 9 months are still where a 6-month baby is. Other babies at 6 months will be where, a 9-month baby is. So it's not so much about age. It's much more about their oral motor skills again, and kind of how you're setting up mealtime and what you've exposed them to. So what you want to look for when you are offering your baby a texture, it's pretty simple actually. We actually just want to see that they can swallow it safely. So there is no choking, obviously, that's a very clear sign, but even excessive coughing or like uncoordinated swallow. So if you think about when you're trying to drink water and sometimes you sputter and cough and you can't control that like water very well, it will kind of look the same for a baby. So obviously that's going to be very obvious. But the other thing is just that they can hold that texture in their mouth and without it falling out. So they have that skill to be able to use their cheeks to kind of suck in, or their tension in their lips to be able to keep that food in their mouth. A lot of babies who are not maybe experienced, I don't want to say not ready, but haven't experienced it and don't know what to do, will literally look like they don't know what to do. So they put it in, they go, bleh, and then they spit all the food out. And so even just a step to getting them to like put it in, hold it there. And then of course, once that's held there, then they can start to do things with it, right? And then we don't want to also see any excessive gagging. So I did mention that. We will see gagging. We want to see gagging. Gagging means actually that they are safe, that their effective gagging mechanism is firing away and keeping them safe and keeping food at the front of their mouth or out of their mouth. Beautiful. That means that it's safe for them to keep practicing. So I always say gagging should be something you're actively looking for, and thank God, take a deep breath, because if they weren't, that means that maybe their body's not reacting and realizing all the things that are happening in there, right? So that's what I would say. If you see excessive gagging, meaning your baby cannot continue the meal, they're gagging so much, they are not able to continue the meal and they're getting upset. Not you though, not you getting upset, because that often will happen where you see your baby gag, it's very stressful for you, understandably, because maybe you're not used to it. But that stress or that reaction can actually cause your baby to get stressed and feel like, I want to stop, I'm going to start crying, we got to end the meal. And so that doesn't necessarily mean your baby's not ready to keep going. It's if your baby is literally unable to continue, I would say, or vomits, let's say. Some babies may vomit on specific textures every time, and they're really not able to eat. Of course, those are all big red flags. Outside of that though, if your baby gets to put it in their mouth, maybe they gag, maybe they don't, maybe they chew it really well, maybe they're just figuring it out. And even if they refuse it, it doesn't mean that they're not ready to move on. I want you to continue offering it for a little bit. So we like to say about 1 to 14 days in each phase, especially like for phase 1, 2, and phase 1 and 2. Give it just a couple weeks. It doesn't have to be months. It does not. If you are consistent and you are reoffering a texture like maybe really like rolled oats the beans, you're doing like a mashed like egg salad or something. Those are all phase 2 textures. And you're giving your baby that opportunity to practice on those every single day for a couple weeks without backup offers of, oh, they didn't eat it, they didn't like it, let's give them a simple puree or something that they do like. Trust me, they will have learned by then, assuming no medical issues. And that is when, again, we can move on. So it's faster than you think, but also it's really not when you learn the framework and you see the signs and you are confident that this is what I need to do. You actually, by day 3, 4, and 5, you're like, oh, actually, I think I'm ready now to move on. So it's, that's sort of, those are the main things to kind of look for how to progress.
Interesting. I never thought about gagging in that light, because you're correct. It's so stressful for parents when they see their child gag a little, because your mind immediately goes to the worst outcome. Are they going to choke on this? Is something caught in their airway? Did it go down the wrong pipe? And so, you're kind of running through like, what's the Heimlich movement in your head, just to be prepared for the worst outcome. So I love that you talk about gagging as a very normal reflex. Of course, ensuring that they're safe and there's no vomiting or projectile vomiting happening and they can still breathe through the meal. But it's really refreshing to hear how you talked about gagging.
Yeah, it's definitely a frame of mind. I feel like that it takes some time once you really learn about it and really understand it, see the difference between gagging and choking, see babies gagging. I think that's a really good strategy. It starts to change in your mind. I often like to tell parents, think of it like teaching your baby how to walk. So when you're teaching your baby how to walk, you're basically setting up a really safe environment for them. Maybe you're making sure there's no sharp corners and you got maybe cushions, or they're on a surface where they can fall and not hurt themselves. But you're actually going to let them fall and then get up again and fall and get up again and fall. And we're not going to say, oh my God, you fell. Don't do this anymore. No, we're not going to practice. This is not good, right? And you're actually going to say, good job, keep it up. You did so well. It's okay. You fall sometimes, keep going. So with gagging, I teach in my program, coach your baby. If you have that pent up energy and you're stressed out and you're like, oh my God, dear Lord, please help me. How do I get out of this? How do I save them? I want you to use that energy to act like you're almost like a cheerleader and you're cheering your baby on. Clap, go, yes, look at you go, keep gagging, come on, you can do it. Oh, that's a big gag, good for you. And oh my God, you did it, yay. And I promise you, again, barring no medical issues, babies always recover. They continue to eat. They're happy. They see you cheer and they're like, oh, and then they keep going. So it's teaching them, again, no big deal. This is normal. My body's just reacting like any other reflex, but we're not in danger. So this is going to help them overcome their fear, the baby and, again, the parent. So it kind of always works both ways.
I love that. I think that analogy is great and would be so useful for so many parents that are navigating this phase. I think the one thing, or the one question on every parent's mind, globally universal, is how do I raise kids that are not picky eaters? How do I put food in front of them that they're going to finish, whether it's the green peas or the broccoli and the cauliflower that you alluded to, or whether it's beef or lamb or even fish and seafood, of course, barring no medical reactions and no allergies. How do I get them to eat everything? You oftentimes see these sort of Pinterest perfect boards of like, feed them the rainbow and every color on the rainbow, or do what you do with adults where it's a little bit of protein, a little bit of carb, a little bit of vegetable. I'm curious to know, as an expert in this field, how do you guide the non-picky, growth in children?
So this is the biggest question in the world, and I will try my best to narrow it down to a couple points, at least to start with. Okay, so often where I see most pickiness start to occur, it's actually in that transition from babyhood to toddlerhood. And in the feeding world, that happens around 10 to 12 months. So even though we're still, for everybody else, they're babies, in the feeding world, I start to anticipate, no, we're actually going to move in and start to see some toddler-like behavior happening at the table. So from 6 to 9 months, they have an affinity for wanting to learn how to eat foods, trying different foods. There's no really built-in like preferences at this point. You could give them fish for breakfast, they would eat it happily. They don't care, they don't know. It's just about exposure and learning how to eat and positive meal times. So that all goes well. But then when you start to hit that point, 10 to 12 months, sometimes 14 months, you actually see more of that innate desire for kids to want to be a little bit more controlling, have more control over their environment, push back, kind of just exert their independence, like typical toddler behavior. But at the table, it shows up earlier because it's one of the only things that they can control in their lives. I mean, they're not necessarily like, they don't know what arrange all the clothes they have to pick out, I want this one or that one, but they can see the food in front of them, and short of force feeding them, no one can make them put that in their mouth. So they're going to exert a lot of that there. And then, one more thing that you'll see is neophobia starts to kick in, meaning that window of opportunity from 6 to 9 months is kind of over. We call it that the honeymoon phase. But now we start to see toddlers enter this phase where they are neophobic, means kind of scared of new foods. And even if they're not like physically scared of it, it's more of a cautiousness that they start to have, and they start to like maybe drop some foods that they used to eat. All of a sudden they don't want to eat it anymore. It's sort of an evolutionary, like from an evolutionary perspective, it was always explained like once they start becoming a little more mobile, they're now out, they can crawl out in the wilderness or wherever they were and come across things they could put in their mouth, but they are now, this neophobic kind of state helps protect them. So unless they start to see their parents eat it more at home, unless they're exposed to it over and over, so you can probably like get the hints as to what we want to do at home, then they become more ingrained in that neophobia, and it can get worse and worse, and foods can really continue to drop off. So my biggest piece of advice is I want you to focus on what you can do as a parent that is going to set the right environment for your child, that is going to kind of keep the tantrums at bay, the power struggles at bay, and also ensures that you're offering them the right types of foods. But then I need you to let go and let your toddler take over the roles that they need to take care of. So really quickly, as a parent, here's what you should focus on. You get to serve what you believe is right for your child. So for every family, that's different. Yes, I think it's amazing. Of course, we have balanced plate like formulas and say you should offer a bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. This is what every meal should look like. Balance it out over the week. Here's how you should do it, blah, blah, blah. Great. But after that, your child has total prerogative and should have all the control as to if they want to eat from what you've served them and how much they want to eat, okay? Which is hard to do. But if you can do that, trust me, that is actually going to be what keeps, remember when I said joyful, peaceful, fun, playful mealtime environment? That's what they need, because developmentally, even toddlers, think about it, they learn through play, they learn through touch, they learn through experimenting, they want to initiate things. So let them do it within this environment we created, right? So we're going to choose what? We're also going to choose when we serve food. So it's not going to be based on, I'm hungry, or they're reaching for something, or banana, or whatever. No, whether it's healthy or not, you choose when meals and snacks go out. So you ideally at 12 months plus, I like to say 2 to 2.5 hours between feeding opportunities. And when you can do that, you are teaching them and allowing them to build up their hunger, be truly hungry for when mealtime comes. And again, they can choose if they want to eat. If they're not hungry, no problem, but you did your job of offering. And they can also choose if they are how much they want to eat based on their hunger level. So again, there's no dictating from us, it's their body, but we are allowing that perfect environment to kind of be set on when. And then, of course, when they fill up, or if they don't fill up, doesn't matter. We're going to teach them there's a period of rest and digest. We want to build up that hunger again. This is what hunger really feels like. This is what full feels like. And so that's going to teach them that basics of that framework. I know there's nuances to all this, but that's kind of the gist. And then the third thing you're going to do as a parent is you're going to choose where meals are served and snacks. Ideally, it's at the table. Ideally, you are seated with them, and it's a great family environment like you see in the movies, but I know real life, kicks in. We've got some busy schedules. So I understand, but try to keep the decision coming from you versus your toddler's at the table 1 minute and then they want to leave and play, and then you're go chasing them and trying to give them food in the playroom, or they can leave the table and then they say, I'm not hungry, but then they want to come back and eat. Mealtime's over. So there's a whole lot to get into with that, but I want you to basically think, I choose what, when, and where. I set the right structure. It's like a teacher in a classroom can set this perfect learning environment. Now let's let them have the freedom and the control that they deserve, that is going to be good for them, that can allow them to listen to their body and get in that explorative state to be able to want to keep trying foods and, assuming I'm offering a variety and repetitive and, multiple exposures, this will come.
Interesting, because what I thought you were going to say was going to be so much more focused on flavor and food and texture. And it's interesting to hear you talk about creating that environment and that structure as it correlates to whether or not children grow up to be picky eaters. I didn't realize there was such a big emphasis on structure and environment and keeping it playful and light and always at a certain, as best as you can, like on a schedule. It's interesting. So for those parents, I mean, or, you know, we can be more specific. My children eat everything. However, my youngest one does not eat eggs. There is something about the egg which blows my mind because everyone in our family loves eggs, but I have tried 10 different ways to serve her the egg. Scrambled egg, omelet, hard-boiled, egg salad. If there is egg on her plate, she'll take a bite and then she'll eat everything else on her plate except the egg. But I still put the egg there, and she's 2, and it's been there a lot. Now, for any parent that's perhaps experiencing what I'm experiencing, but maybe it's with peas or it's with carrots or it's with, I don't know, broccoli, like all of those really great healthy green vegetables. How do you encourage a child to eat the thing that you can visibly see that they're never eating, no matter how many times it's being offered to them?
Okay, yes. Let's dive in really quick. So first I will say, I feel you on the eggs. My youngest didn't eat eggs at all until he was about 10. So when I say that this could be a long process, it could be a long process. Now, it doesn't mean, it shouldn't look like, oh, there's so many foods they don't eat and it's a battle and stress at the table every day. No, that means we don't have the right strategies in place. But it's normal for some kids, some adults, not to like every food. That being said, what you are doing is perfect by offering it every time you are having it in the house as part of the family meal. Put it on the plate. And it's a wonderful sign that she isn't anxious. She's not freaking out and crying and get this off my plate and or I can't touch or gagging at the sight. So you've taught her, again, we've got a pretty, I would assume, a great environment happening. So now when she takes a bite, I want you to actually be like, whoa, what did that feel like in your mouth? So sometimes, again, there's a lot of nuance, but one example is sometimes we can maybe say things like, oh, well, isn't that good? Like, didn't you like it? Wasn't it really yummy? Like, why don't you just take another one? I don't get it. You just took a bite and you're fine. Or it's just 2 bites. Just take 2 bites, and so we start intervening and we want to like maybe make it look different than how it looks. What happens to a toddler? They're like, oh God, battle time. I'm going to like stand my ground. This is no longer my idea. It's my mom or dad's idea, or just because somebody said something, I'm going to say no. Or maybe they really don't like it. And again, it's turning them off. So I also think to myself a lot of times, like imagine I was sitting in a restaurant in some country. I've never tried that food before. And it looks so different to me. And I am having such a hard time like eating it, let alone putting it in my mouth or smelling it. And the chef is standing over me and he's like, just try it. I don't get it. Just try it. Everyone else eats it. It's really good. I put salt on it. I don't get, So you kind of have to think about that. We want kids to move in at their own pace. So again, the right environment's going to be key there. Continuing to expose them. I did it for 10 years for my kid. It was a lot. Yes, but with time, things come. Then the other part to it is because kids are so playful and so, again, developmentally wired to learn through play, I love food play at the table. I love it. I would, again, forget eating it. That's not even a goal, or pretend it's not a goal for you. Act like poker face. I don't even care if you eat it or not. But maybe you pick up your egg and maybe you're like, oh, it's a boiled egg, let's say. It's really like rubbery or slippery. Oh my gosh, when I try and squish it, it like slips out of my hand, And then you can turn to your toddler and be like, is yours slippery? And maybe she doesn't feel comfortable picking it up. Maybe she feels comfortable poking it. Maybe she does feel comfortable picking it up. Maybe you get into a whole huge game about it. So again, we're going to work with where your toddler is. And then there are lots of games and things that you could do to move them up. There's 32 steps to eating, which I know sounds like a lot, but often they jump big amounts to get them to, again, interact with food without having top of mind, I need to eat this, mom wants me to eat this, ugh, I don't want to eat this, how much do I have to eat, I just want to leave, this sucks. It's play. So that is one kind of big tip outside of just exposing them and whatever, is just get them having fun and interacting with it with that new framework, that new frame of mind, I mean.
I love that suggestion because you are right. Kids do learn through play. And I think just de-stressing that environment completely and making it a really healthy, playful, light, easy breezy feeling, even though internally you're probably so anxious and so stressed out because now you're thinking, well, I got to prepare another meal because she's not eating this one. And but I love how you're getting us to sort of rewire how we think about feeding our children as opposed to forcing it or any such thing. Edwena, I want to talk about nutrition and ensuring that we are giving our kids really nutritious food. I think today so many parents are working and busy and juggling multiple things all at once, and and you're always so time restricted to put healthy food on the table. And I think the choices in the shopping aisles, for better or for worse, perhaps don't always produce the best nutritiously healthy meals, although I understand it is a go-to for some families. What are your suggestions on how parents can navigate making sure that the meals that they're feeding the kids are really nutritious, even if they are in a hurry or in a pinch?
It is, I'm not going to lie, yes, it is a very tough thing for even me, because when you think about, okay, let's define kind of what nutritious is. Again, it looks different for every family, but generally speaking, I like to say do your best to adhere to whole foods as much as possible. Now, within that framework, yes, you want iron, high iron foods, high fiber foods, high fat foods, and the right types of healthy fat. And of course, you can learn all of that stuff. But let's just start with, let's try our best not to go to maybe process things that have a lot of additives or chemicals or maybe, sugars and salts and things like that as much as possible. Totally understand though that sometimes you need to. So when we think of that, we often think, well, I've got to prepare this big, huge meal that is, again, a whole loaded casserole and plus this side salad and plus this thing. No, I want you to really simplify what a meal looks like. I love my go-tos, honestly, when my kids come home after school, they've got some kind of practice or something they got to go to, we got to eat something fast. I love canned salmon, canned sardines, canned tuna, those are the great protein sources that are canned. Then for carbs and protein, canned beans, chickpeas, that kind of thing. So I want to, if anyone out there is thinking well, canned, is that healthy? It definitely is. If you want to take it up a notch, go for a BPA-free lining, or ones in glass jars are even better. But honestly, the end of the day, trust me, the nutrients are getting into your kid, and it is super easy. No cook required. If it's got some salt, you want to reduce some salt, run it under some cold water, rinse it a little bit, or go for a no salt added version. Plop that on a plate, maybe mix some of that wild salmon with some yogurt or mayo or nothing. It doesn't matter. And then maybe you have again, could you meal prep? Sure. Do you have any roasted or cooked veggies? Add that on. If not, grab something raw. If not, grab a piece of cheese. So I just think let's kind of frame again, what does a meal have to look like? And maybe one meal a day is a great meal where it really looks like a beautiful home cooked thing. But it can be when you start to break down well, I could pull this thing and this thing and this thing together and just put it together as a little meal. It is often a lot faster. It could be 2 minutes to 5 minutes to prepare something. So you don't have to reach for that frozen thing or pureed pouch or whatever it might be that you're going for. So just kind of trying to get into that habit. Just a meal could be 5 minutes to put together. We have a snack guide, and I do have a blog, and I'm just trying to remember the name of it. But if you look up snacks for toddlers on our website, you will find some quick and easy put together meals that you can just do that are, again, not going to cause a lot of stress, but going to be nutritious. So you're going to take a look at, I always say for 12 months and up, you want a source of protein. So we give you a list. Here's the protein foods that are really quick and easy. You could do it in 5 minutes. Here's a quick, what's the other one? Fiber is the other one. So high fiber foods. And then the other one is fat. So again, when you can just kind of, okay, I know the categories, boom, boom, boom. Here's your fully balanced plate. No more guilt. I just don't want you to have to think it has to be something elaborate for it to be healthy.
I think this question's probably on a lot of people's mind. It is on mine. What is the pediatric nutritionist feeding her kids? Or what were you feeding your toddlers? What were some of your maybe 2 or 3 go-to family recipes that everyone loved and enjoyed, and you would be really proud of putting them together?
Okay. Wow. I did not expect this question, but I can think of one specific type of food, genre of foods my kids always went for was when I would serve any kind of Mexican type Tex-Mex meal, whether it be quesadillas or tacos or, fajitas, any variation. But one of the reasons why is because it was laid out family style, which is another strategy for working with toddlers, especially kids up to even age 8, 10. When you kind of have, so let's say I could offer a lasagna, boom, that's the whole thing mixed into one. Obviously, and I'm not saying everyone should have every meal separated, but it was so easy when you could have tortillas here, cheese here, meat here, yogurt here, salsa here, whatever, your peppers and things here. Now it's fun, first of all. 2, it's giving them the power. I get to choose what goes on mine. And even if they're not choosing it in their wrap or their taco or whatever, it's, let's put some on this side plate right here. And then that's your plate. can we play? Can we interact? Blah, blah, blah. They know they don't have to eat it, but it's low pressure and they're experimenting. So I remember those would be hits for sure. My kids, okay, I know this sounds also really weird. People are probably gonna be like, that's not a great tip, but my kids love sardines. They always loved sardines. So again, when I'm thinking quick, I would always be like, healthy fat, tons of omega-3s, boom, open it up, plop it on your plate, here's a cheese, some cheese with it or something. Just basically the quickest, easiest meal that was really healthy. They did love those, but that's because, again, I really kind of trained them into that early on. So that was, definitely a thing. And then what do they love? I mean, they kind of have a variety. But I do think like pastas were a thing, but they weren't a huge thing. I would say just any kind of like mashed potato or potato type thing. So starch. They loved with a protein on the side. Again, I felt like a little bit more separated. Or if it was fish with a protein and a vegetable and then optional sauce. So I feel like when they were growing up, I did try to deconstruct meals within reason so that it was just a little bit more customizable for everybody. And that worked really well.
Yeah, that's great. I love that because you're right. They do get that sense of feeling really empowered and independent where especially with the family style meals where they can pick and choose, but maybe if they see what you're putting in your taco or the way you're eating a certain meal, it might also encourage them to do the same. So I love hearing the personal anecdote. And my mind is blown that your kids love sardines. I love sardines, but I feel like that is such a unique, powerful, often pungent is the word that's associated with sardines. So the fact that they love that, I mean, my kids are not at the sardine phase, but they do love olives, which feels like a huge win.
Perfect.
Because again, that falls into that really pungent, acidic.
It is definitely a huge win.
Profile. Yeah.
Yeah, I know so many adults that won't eat olives, so it's super impressive. And again, that's like a testament to like their palates really have like adapted and expanded. And so like for anybody who maybe is in the baby stage that's listening to this or watching this, I would say go for the sardines. We have a 60-day meal plan. It's I think introduced in week 3. Offer sardines, offer liver. We do liver I think in week 2. They're very off-putting for a lot of adults, but that's only because we haven't been exposed to them much, but they're such nutritional powerhouses. So use that 6 to 9 month period to really get a good baseline. Then maybe they start dropping some foods, but you've got a lot to work with and the foundations are there. So then you can implement all the strategies to keep them going with them, hopefully throughout the years, even if there's a couple weeks where they drop and then come back to it.
Come back to it. Yeah. And that's great. It's almost like it's like a numbers game because if you introduce them to 50 things, then even if they drop 10 or 20, you're still left with so much more that you can continue to work with and feed them. I've loved this conversation. Edwena, if people want to learn more and connect with you and get access to your courses and guides, what is the best way they can do so?
So you can find me on Instagram every single day pretty much at My Little Eater. You can come to our website and find tons of free blogs, mylittleeater.com. We also have a brand new free workshop on how to start solids, and it's a realistic first week of feeding your baby. So I walk you through the menu exactly, when it's served, how it's served. I show videos of me feeding my niece, what to look for, all that good stuff, and you get a first 5 days meal plan as well. So you can head to mylittleeater.com to join that.
Amazing. And we'll put all the links at the end of the video in the notes section so people can just very easily click, navigate, follow you, and get all of these incredible tips and guides that you've talked about and shared. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. I love chatting with you.